Good. I'm Eddie Abrams, Chairman of the CAC. Good evening. Today is Monday, March 11th, 2024. The MPO Citizens Advisory Committee is called to order. Do we have anyone joining us virtually?
We have consultants working.
This is Frank Kalpakis with Renaissance Planning. I'm joining you virtually.
Okay. Okay. All righty. Can we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of Allegiance to the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. I follow my script here, sorry. All right, this is the public comment section. We're on item 3 of the agenda. Public comments. I understand we have one person that would like to speak. Danny Williams, would you like to speak?
My name is Danny Williams. I work as an IT consultant in South Sarasota County. I was going over the, and I'm here because I do most of my commuting on bike and bus, so I'm interested in transit. And going over the minutes from the last meeting, I saw the MPO did a presentation that involved the congestion management plan. And it looked to me like there was $2.5 million per segment, times 14 of them, so $37 million for incident response vehicles. And I just want to know if that's, to my simple brain, is that what that sounds like? Are we really spending $37 million to drag broken cars off the highway? Because that's nearly our entire Breeze budget. Breeze budget, I think, is $40 million. To be spending as much dragging broken cars off as we do for our whole system seems out of balance. So if someone wants to answer me later, that's fine.
I can give you a beach, but it sounds low. I think it's $37 million is probably short. Not much we spend. And traffic incident management and cost of lives and the cost of repairs. That sounds maybe even more than we studied. But right, we've averaged in the last 7 years, we have over 10,000 reported accidents in the region, over 120 lives lost, and thousands of serious injuries, incapacitating injuries, all resulting in vehicle reclamation and costs related to that, hospital bills, insurance increases, etc. So 37 million on the whole, probably agree. So yes, in comparison, yes, our automobile traffic does contribute quite a substantial to our process. So hopefully that
Road rangers, ambulances, fire trucks, tow trucks,
anything that deals with incident management.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help you?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much for participating, coming out. We appreciate that. Next item is on the agenda is the minutes, approval of the minutes from.
So moved.
Second. Okay, well, I have a question. There were two, for the purposes of discussion, there were two items that were sent, that were questioned around the table, and the answers were sent out. I know that Lindsay sent them out to me, right? So do we capture that in the minutes, or do we capture that somewhere else?
We capture it in this, now that you just said it.
It's in the minutes.
Correct.
That was one of my thoughts.
Absolutely.
All right, so we have a motion to accept and a second to accept the minutes as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes approved. Okay, we have a couple of other action items. The minutes are one, and this, so a couple of presentations and action items. Action 5A on the agenda, and I understand Pamela Barr from
That would be me.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
So we have quite an extensive list for the TIP amendments. And the reason there is that many is because they were part of the earmarks that were from this last, not this most recent go around, but the previous go around of appropriations. And so we had 3 of them for Sarasota. We had Sumter, Laurel Road, and the city of Northport. And then for Manatee, we had 4 or 5 of them. We had 51st Street West from 53rd Avenue to El Conquistador Parkway. We had Fort Hammer Road, 4-lane design, and then also Fort Hammer Bridge design and permitting. We had the city of Anna Maria re-imaging Pine Avenue. And then we also had 44th Avenue East Connection in Manatee County. So these, some of them call for an amendment to the TIP. Sometimes there's done as modifications because they're not getting federal funds. They're getting state funds. But it's not funds that's going to affect your regular projects. They brought forth in the TAC meeting. These are extra funds that were able to be put on these that came down from the state.
So these funds are, for my application, when it says earmarked, those funds are available. They're
In the
Yes.
current fiscal year, and as Pam mentioned, those are general revenue
It's revenue,
money,
right, from the state.
not highway trust fund. So.
any questions?
I'm just curious, like the 51st Street, west from 53rd to Elkhorn, do you know how much is there available for that project to happen?
Yeah. All right, so 51st Street west from 53rd Avenue to Conquistador received $2,500,000. And that was for construction.
I think that road's been built yet. So it's just money available for that road.
That's money available for that. Behind you is Dave.
It's a portion of it, not nearly the amount that.
Right.
One of the problems with earmarks, and especially if they're from the highway trust fund, but you can see it in these general fund earmarks as well, is that they cover only a small portion of the project sometimes. And then it's up to the local government that requested them to find the rest of the money. And, sometimes they have partnerships with developers, and that's a good thing. And sometimes they are looking for any available money. That can be challenging. Good question.
Any other questions?
Yes,
Go ahead.
the project on Laurel Road, is that the one from Knight's Trail up to Jacaranda, or was it widening?
Capacity and mobility. I don't have that right now. I can look it up for you.
Okay, no hurry, thank you.
See if I can.
My question is, what is ACNP, Advanced Construction NHPP funds?
National Highway Program, and an AC means advanced construction. So basically, they're borrowing against themselves in the future.
Who's they?
State,
State.
government. So anytime you see AC, that means advanced construction. That means they're pulling that in from a future year's allocation. Sometimes you have to do that as there's required, it gets into the further math of how you're able to account for it, but there is a deallocation amount they have to carry. Typically, it's like 10 or 15%. So really that's referring to funds they're required to spend and allocate into future years. They're moving into the current year to invest for a project. So that's the National Highway Program. The state applied those funds. It wasn't at the request of.
So what will those funds be used for?
So that Sumner Boulevard, I know, is typically, there's 2, you got Toledo Blade and Sumner, those are both signalized issues getting onto the interstate. So interchange improvements, that's referring to the signals, your entry on and off the interchange. So that.
I understand that, but what are the funds being used for? Design, planning?
That's for construction. Anytime it's highway construction funds. Yeah.
Okay,
So they're actually putting in the signals.
that's the total cost of that project is $5.181 million? Okay. So when there's no more funds in 25, 26, 27, the projects will be done in 25.
Correct.
Yeah.
Not all places, but for that project, yes.
Okay, that's why I didn't understand what
Yeah.
advanced construction funds.
Yeah.
I assume that might be funds to be used for design. It looks like the design build project, so.
Yeah, no, AC is just, it is a funding code. It refers to, and And there's all different types of AC. There's ACSA, there's ACSU. Those are our funds. Basically, it's an accounting procedure that says they have to spend them a specific amount of funds. Basically, contingency issues the state has to deal with their budget. So, accounting process, the state can clarify more if they like, but basically, we're required to use those at some point.
So this primarily is going to be replacing traffic signals?
Yeah, mainly in the entries and exits, entries and egress on the interchange itself. As far as I know, they would potentially give you more, but
Those are new, that weren't signals there.
correct, correct.
They're not signals there now. They're going to add signals. Are they going to add pavement lanes? Okay.
But I generally know that's what they're doing on this, their changes. Right now, they're yielding, because there wasn't really any southern bound traffic. Those were 3-leg
Okay.
interchanges.
Would it be possible sometime to have FDOT give us a presentation on how they do design build projects?
Sure.
Because I'm familiar with how Missouri does them, the Missouri Department of Transportation, and it's a little different than most people do.
Sure.
design.
Ask them, goes back to the group and see if they can get us a presentation
Okay.
on how design build operates here.
Any other questions for item 5A or Pam or anyone else? Seeing none, do I have a motion to, I guess we're accepting this or passing it?
Yeah, to vote by.
I'll second it.
Have a motion? So moved.
Oh, so I'm sorry.
Okay,
I'll second.
okay.
I thought you were making the motion.
Sorry. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
All right.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next item is 5B. And this is gonna be you, right?
Yep. So as you may know, I know we've covered it annually. This is our project priorities. We brought this to you all in January as a draft. The project priorities is our way of transmitting local priorities to FDOT for funding in the upcoming draft tentative work program. We've gone through and done work at length with the technical advisor committee and local staff on, narrowing down their project list, finding out if projects have been completed, removing projects that are no longer priorities, and updating limits, et cetera. At this point, we've received applications for all the projects that are on this list, as well as templates that are signed by their jurisdictions, by your representative jurisdictions, stating that these are their priorities. Those lists will be then taken to the board on the 25th, pending the results of this meeting and this morning's TAC meeting, noting any comments or changes that need to be added. They'll take it to the board on the 25th and then transmitted to the department for consideration, the upcoming draft tentative work program. There has been a few minor changes to this list. There was one repetitive project that was included in the resiliency box fund that was also on the needs list that was removed this afternoon. So that won't show up there again. But really, I'm happy to take any questions related to any of the projects on this list. There's lots going on. We'll have to continue to move forward. We're looking forward to continuing, advancing these projects across the board. If you have any questions on the program types, the specific projects, I'd be happy to take any questions on them.
Anyone else have any? I have a couple of thoughts. I think I ask this every time, but what is CST and ROW and PE? What
So those are the phases, right? So I'll run through them real quick. If there's more than that. There's start at the beginning is FEAS, that can be feasibility study. So that's prior to a PD&E. PD&E is project development environmental. PE is design, preliminary engineering. Right away, it's ROW. CST is construction.
CSTs. I
Yep.
kept thinking that was cost.
Yeah, so those are the phases. We do our best. We go through and work with the jurisdictions to make sure their applications, we ask them to check that box on their applications to make sure they are updating them annually. Sometimes they do not get updated, so we do go back through every year to update those current phases to make sure they're as accurate as possible.
Would it be possible to get this? Because I keep asking this and the next time this comes up in 3 months, I'll forget what those
Yeah.
If you could.
Sure.
Or just send it to me.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and we'd be happy to include it in the legend.
That would be,
Yeah.
that would be nice. The other question I had was, so down at the bottom, there's these color coded, which is really great, by the way, the way this is color coded. I'm finally understanding this after a couple of years of it. The white pages at the bottom, it says.
Sure.
It seemed that some of these titles resembled what Pam just presented. Is that true?
Yes, they can. So what the white projects at the bottom are things that were not identified in our LRTP, and we had no dedicated funding to address those priorities. These were what we call jurisdictional needs. There's lots of ways you can call them. They're unfunded needs, right, within our plan. What your local jurisdictions can do is they can go to the legislature and request funding for these projects outside of our process. If the legislator deems it's necessary and appropriate, they will then apply funds to those projects. Historically, we don't love that because it kind of messes with the process. And if they use transportation trust fund, that comes out of our budget. This time around, in 2 years, the last 2 years, they've come into general revenue, so we haven't really had a lot of issues maintaining our work program when they use general revenue. This year, I will report that's probably not going to be the case. We have an all-time high request of appropriations this year. 11 projects, I think, was from just our jurisdiction. 170 in the state, over $300 million in appropriations. And it looks like the majority of that would be taken out of the trust fund. So anything, if the cause, it's a net zero game, right? So however much was requested out, if it gets approved, would didn't need to be worked into our work program that way. So yes, you could be very fair in assuming that there are projects on this list that they did submit for appropriations requests.
And one of the things I noticed, again, I'm relatively new to this area, been here a few years, but when I see the name and then I look over here and I see a score of 1.96, and I look up some things that get a score of 4.2, and they're not funded, but the 1.96 got funds. But what you're saying is someone found funds to put to that project.
Correct.
That's why it's.
Yes.
Will it move up on the,
Yes.
in the color chart?
Yes, once it meets those criteria, it can. And really, we at times we've left them down here to say that we still have no dedicated funds. It doesn't mean that it can't move forward through that process.
Okay.
It just means that we have no revenue set aside in our revenue projections for that project. That's really what the jurisdictional needs section is about.
Sorry.
Projects, like, especially like north of the river, where, well, my question is, like, are there any projects where you guys have done the research, but maybe like 6 months or in the future or a year later, you say, well, maybe we could do something different? Because it just seems like we're stuck at a certain time of year. Like there's 2-hour traffic waits, an hour traffic wait. Do you think that there's enough overpasses that?
So that's a combination of a lot of things, right? I think, we had a presentation this morning and it'll be available for you all as well. We're projecting, I think in the next 30 years to have over 1.25 million people in this region. That's an addition of 400,000 people in the next 25 years. How you deal with that is a very complex question. And I think especially where that development is concentrated, primarily in the northeast part of Manatee County and the southeast portion of Sarasota County. Vast majority of the population growth is in those two areas. As you will see, the priority and appropriations list we just talked about, numerous requests are being made at the appropriations level by Manatee County to address those concerns. Fort Hamer Road, Moccasin Wallow, Buckeye, 301, all are appropriations requests. The issue with that is that we are not able to pivot we're luckily in the development of our long-range transportation plan, just kicked it off last month. We do not pivot as fast as they can build homes. And I think that's part of the issue, right? Is land use planning that goes along with what we're doing with the transportation system. And it's also extremely prohibitive, right? So these improvements are, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to do all the things, right? Billions if you count everything that probably would need to be done in our region to address those needs. So it's complex, but yes, there is ongoing efforts to address where we know, in the development of our long-range plan, the model runs that we're doing will demonstrate that and will exercise out exactly how we need to address and which roadways we need to address this growth. So the long answer is yes. How fast we can do it is probably not as fast as we'd like.
Have you ever seen anything in any of the cities where they have like mandatory, like, I wouldn't say, where certain parts of the counties was able to, like, if you got off at 4 o'clock, they get off at 5 o'clock. And we get off at different times where the traffic is less congested.
It's been mentioned, right? So there's been places where they've staggered work schedules. That has been a concept. I mean, that's a much larger, I think, legislative issue. Same with school, right? I think one of our biggest issues is school. School year is a very, when you get in school and get out of school, it all happens to coincide when you get out of work, right? We've noticed our traffic patterns. You notice in the summer, getting over the bridge is much simpler.
Right.
Well, when you don't have, you're out of season and you don't have school, things change a lot. So I think there has been discussion on that. Obviously, that's a much larger legislative issue than what we can deal with, I think, required probably heavy levels of lobbying. But there has been consideration for that. And there is obviously daily planning on how we address this continuous growth. I guess a good issue to have, it's a difficult one to answer.
So curiosity, I mean, when you've got something that's green all the way across, like
Yeah.
this. Okay, so like, for instance, Southern Parkway.
Yep.
The one that had a bike path and it's in
Construction.
construction. So
Yeah.
that's actually.
That's being built right now.
But like, Mountain Trails Network is.
Design.
It's next design.
Yep,
But are the funds to construct it or just funds to design?
just funds through design right now.
Okay.
So we need to find construction funds.
Okay.
Yep,
So that's what it means, but in the green, it says
Correct.
have been partially funded or some
Yes.
funds.
yes. So when you see the green category all the way across, it means it's part of it's been funded by this is why the rank's gone, which means we are going to fund it through, but we do not have the fully funds committed to that thing all the way across. Yep.
Yes,
Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
One general question, you said this, I can tell a little bit of difference between the previous.
Yeah.
One we looked at. Does this mean there's more funding been available, or you've changed the priority ranking of some of these projects?
Some things have moved by deletion, right? There's been several projects that have been just removed. If we didn't receive new applications for them, they've been removed, things have slid up. It's really just the nature of, we took this draft, same thing in January to the TAC. We said, are these still all your priorities? They say this one isn't, these two are. They do move around based off of what we received back in applications.
So I've got several questions on the projects in South Sarasota County on River Road.
Sure.
Widening from US 41 to Winchester is listed as a FDOT partnership using TRIP funds. The name of its regional interstate connector versus the current River Road project is more of an evacuation route. Funded.
Very similar. I mean,
There's no difference.
the name there is really generalized.
Okay.
And the good news, I think we have, in our last board meeting, we do have some positive forward movement on South River Road. We do have funding working in place for that. So that partnership program is kind of an optimistic look at it, right? It requires a local match, and B, utilization of state off system.
So I'm assuming that the Sarasota County, Northport,
They're working heavily on
they're
this themselves.
wanting to invest in that project.
Yes.
Okay, same thing with number 10, which is box funds. What's the difference in TRIP and box?
So box funds are a set aside, right? So in the cost feasible plan, we have dedicated revenue for specific projects. If we knew what the projects was, the limits were, we dedicated specific revenue and 5-year time bands to that project. A box fund is a general conglomeration of funds. So over a 25-year period, say we set aside for safety is an easy one, $75 million. So that equals out to $3 million a year we can spend on that. Specific roadways, we didn't have all the projects identified at the time. We were either working through studies or there are a larger number of segments you could apply for. If there was an eligible segment, it would work within that box fund. Typically, the box funds revolve around specific funding types. So resiliency, safety, multimodal, congestion management. Box funds revolve around specific project types.
So these are listed as a preliminary engineering.
Mhm.
Does that mean they're also going to have the same priority as they go ahead to right away?
Yes, they will continue. I mean, that is the number one goal, I think, is maintaining our pipeline, right? If we get a project in, it's being designed, our intent is to deliver it through construction. Yeah.
So do you have any idea what the right of way is?
None on South River Road, according to the commissioner.
That's my understanding. Okay.
Yep.
My last question, Venice Avenue, My understanding, that's not a state route.
No.
And so why is that getting FDOT partnership box funds?
It can, it's off system. So OE is other roadways are off system. So there is a dedicated pot of off system roadway funds that can be utilized for non-state roads. Difficult to access, I will say, but it is a way that we could also leverage out. That also, once again, I remind you, requires a match, a substantial match from the local government, 50%. So if they want to draw down the other half, they'd have to put up 50% themselves.
Just from us living there, that project will make a big difference on relieving congestion on River Road.
Yes, and I would keep it, and I keep in mind too, that these at the time were kind of in their infancy. They were kind of early on stages 4 or 5 years ago when we developed the LRTP in 2019. Now these kind of have progressed. I'd be surprised if the vast majority of these work their way into being cost feasible. If these priorities are maintained, they have a tendency to do that. At the time, these were new ideas. These were new projects that didn't have really much planning into them. There wasn't much to them. We wanted to make sure they're on the list for consideration. This is where, in this update process, we can see a consolidation or movement from kind of an idea to more of a realistic concept where we can dedicate revenue to it.
So widening of East Dennis Avenue would be a very good thing to do.
Agreed.
If it stays in the program.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Ryan, what were those population projections again?
Sure. So in the 2 counties, it's about 400,000, 388, if I'm not mistaken, for both. 1.275 for the region. We're about 850 right now.
And what year is that?
2050 for our scope of our long range plan.
Will the counties be built out at that point then?
There is a belief, right? No. The short answer is no, but we will be increasing at a slowing rate, right? So increasing at a decreasing rate, meaning we will be reaching carrying capacity. I think it was 2080, they were saying that we pretty much are leveled out where we could. If you go in, the model does kind of anticipate we don't go back into we're not tearing down single family residential neighborhoods. We're not doing that. So if there was massive upheaval, political differences that did happen, and we started taking out neighborhoods and building high rises, which I don't see happening, it could go higher, right? But I think with the land that's available, the projections that we've seen, all that went into this analysis, that it does level out, but it's still increasing at a decreasing rate. But not as fast as we're listing right now by 2050.
And other projections for Sarasota and Bradenton cities?
Yes, there are. I think the city was 10,000 people, adding an additional 10,000. The biggest one was Northport. Northport was adding 90,000 people in the next 25 years. Northeast Manatee County was nearly the same. It was 89,000 in the next 25 years.
Is that what year was that?
2050.
2050.
Yep. And we can provide you that report as well. I'll send that out to everyone and see.
Who was that done by?
Metro Forecasting. They are doing travel demand modeling and socioeconomic data for pretty much all the MPOs on the West Coast of Florida. So pretty much we're doing a completely district-wide analysis, our population growth. It also included forecasts in jobs, the necessary number of schools, industry growth, things like that.
No questions from anyone? I do have a kind of general question. I know that at the intersection of Road 75 and Cortez, they're going to build 6,500 homes. So is there a project in this list? Did Bradenton ask for anything for those roads? Because
there's thoughts right now, right? I wouldn't say anything specific, but I think you'll hear about the Cortez vision plan here shortly. They're aware of that. FDOT is clearly aware of that. I think recommendations will be coming out of that deal with that. While we do want to maintain the vision of Cortez Village and other areas,
right,
we do have to maintain and understand kind of traffic that's going to be demanding on that roadway. The capacity there is already at a high level, right? In the volume, we don't really anticipate, right? We're not looking at widening the road. We're going to have to find other creative solutions to deal with that, ITS and signal timing, all that's got to come into play.
not long ago, this group, we talked about a safety plan for Cortez Road, because what I think I remember reading was that area of Cortez, like through where the Home Depot is, I guess, and Walmart and all that is one of the most dangerous highways in the whole state of Florida.
That is correct. Yep, still is. So, and that's great. It'll be a good segue. The next presentation on the list is that corridor study, and they'll discuss that at length about, the vision that they've identified and the things that they encountered, the issues that they need to kind of identify and overcome in order to make it a better corridor. So it's a great question. That's why these studies are done. At the end of the day, there is a difficult question, right? And it's going to be required creative answers to kind of deal with some of that growth.
So I guess we need a motion to accept this.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Presentations, right? Okay, next is the Cortez Road Vision and Action Plan. Wow, I guess I should have read that before. Say Victor? Victor?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Victor Siguri. I'm the planning studio for District 1, and I'm also the project manager, one of the project managers for the Corridor Vision and Action Plan. And today I'm here to present our vision that we developed by hearing what the community had to say. We met with different stakeholders, elected officials, for an extended period of time, and we're here to share what we heard from the community and see if you have any comments or feedback on what we heard. And I would not repeat why we were doing this. We already heard how much the area is growing, how fast it's growing, and the dangers there are on the corridor, especially on the eastern side of the corridor. Here's our study limits. It goes from 121st Street all the way to US 301. So it's a pretty lengthy corridor for us to study. We're not including the bridge, just as an FYI, but we are looking at the entire corridor to see what kind of solutions and what kind of vision does the community have for it. We already heard that we want to preserve some of the character going towards the beach. We don't want to mess too much with that. We know there's development coming around 7th, 5th. So we want to consider all of those things that are coming and put forward the vision so that as it gets built out and developed, it is done in the right way. So based on what we heard and what we've seen out there, we developed some themes to guide our strategy. So that's the vision themes. The main one is a safe and accessible corridor for all modes, so bikes, pedestrians, freight, transit. So looking at alternatives for everybody. We also highlighted connectivity, the grid network, so more ways to get around besides just having one straight shot through Cortez Road. That would help alleviate some of the traffic and help people who are traversing the corridor. Economic vitality. So we want to make sure that businesses along the corridor are thriving and the new businesses that are coming also have an opportunity. And we also want to make sure we maintain the corridor characteristics, but also enhance the sense of place. So people who are living there, who are from the community, they can feel good about the place where they are. Here's just some background and some part of our technical analysis. Those are the intersections that are congested right now, and they're operating under the standard level service assigned to them. It doesn't mean they're failing, it just means they are congested, and you can see 75th and the eastern part of the corridor are where the intersections are most congested. And those are existing conditions. And based on the 2050 projections, the conditions are to be the same where they were and also going to deteriorate getting all the way to 75th. And as you get closer to the bridge, you see the red dots in there. So it's not going to get any prettier or any better as we get all the traffic, not all the traffic, all the people moving into the county. Population growth, I think just for Manatee County, in 2050, it's about 215,000 people. And that's a little larger than the city of Fort Lauderdale. So it's a lot of people moving into Manatee County. Some of the things that we observe on the corridor is the high level stress for pedestrians and cyclists. And that is due to, the high speed of vehicles, the amount of traffic, the lack of facilities and infrastructure for cyclists and pedestrians. And so we know that all of that is hindering the ability of people who wants to bike and walk on the corridor. And it's something we want to address. Some of the key analytical findings is more of our technical and the data that we collected. So we already know there's going to be a lot more people living in Manatee County, and that's going to increase trips for all modes. So pedestrians, bicycles, especially vehicles. So we want to make sure we find alternatives that will address that. The forecast also, as you see in the graph, congestion is probably not going to go entirely away, and it's going to be consistent. We've seen a high number of crashes. It was also mentioned that Cortez, that segment is on our top 10 high crash list. So especially on that eastern segment, that's where we see the most crashes. And we also want to address the needs of the disadvantaged communities that are around the corridor who might need different ways to get around. They might not own a car, they might not have income to purchase a car, or maybe they chose not to have a car, or they have different abilities to get around. We also found that transit ridership is growing. It's something that is continued to be built up and is adding to the mobility along the corridor. We also looking at the types of trips that are being made on the corridor, and we have found that most of the trips are being done within the corridor. So the local discretionary trips are trips that generally starts within the corridor area and ends within the corridor area. So those are local. Yes.
You want questions then already?
You can wait to the end, but if you want to know, since you're.
I was just curious, when you say the transportation, transit ridership is up, is it up compared to the percentage of growth, per capita growth we've had in the area, or is it just?
Based on
You
riding.
get more people, you're gonna have more people riding, but is it a higher percentage of the population?
It's a higher percent of the population. So it's in comparison to the whole population, percentage of riders, so it's all relative. So it's not just the ridership growing, we're accounting for the population. But so the types of trips, those are something that we can work with, and we saw the congestion, but if it's a lot of the trips are made within the corridor, if there are alternatives to those trips, that can be something that can be addressed, but that's part of what we found. We would also took account of the right of way, so the space that we have to work with. So there are some areas where it is a little bit narrow, so widening the corridor might not be an option, or things that we can do may be limited to the amount of right of way that we have. And the Cortez corridor has a lot of areas that are suitable for development. We have the Lake Flores coming up, but we also have a lot of surface parking lot in the area. I think it's over 50% of the area that could be suitable for redevelopment. And I'm not saying we're going to wipe out all the parking lot. I'm just saying that there's a lot of areas where, if we're strategic, it could be redeveloped into something. So that was the analytical part of the data that we got, but we also had a lot of stakeholder engagement. We had meetings with a public workshop. We met with the businesses along Cortez Road, We also interview some of the elected officials to get their input and how we're going to build the vision. So all of the things that we're sharing today, those came out of the community. It's not that FTOT came up with all the things that we heard. So we want to make sure everybody understands this is a community-driven approach to how we're developing the vision. And based on those stakeholder meetings, we identify some opportunities and desires. So the number one that we heard was dedicated transit lanes for consistent and reliable service. And what that means is for transit to work, they want to make sure the bus is not stuck behind cars in traffic. But to have the dedicated lane, more likely people will use it and will be a viable option. We also heard optimize traffic flow for the corridor. So we talked about different alternatives and how to manage congestion. That's one way to do it. We want to increase safety for our pedestrians and cyclists. So one is protecting bicycle infrastructure throughout the corridor. Wider buffered sidewalks. So as the corridor gets developed, we've had more businesses. We talked about accessibility. So those sidewalks will make a big difference. And clearly defined and more abundant mid-block crosswalks. So more places where people can make the crossing throughout the corridor. So continuing on the opportunity, so leverage redevelopment and infill opportunities. So as developments are coming in, partnering with the developers to help bring the vision forward. Use the lands that are prime for redevelopment. Make sure we are, the land use and creating the sense of place where tourists and locals are not just driving through to go to the beach. They actually have a destination where they want to go on Cortez Road. We want to enhance the multimodal access to businesses. Again, how we develop the sidewalk, the bike network, make sure that everybody has access to the business. And last, improve the aesthetic of the corridor with median landscape and other features that will also enhance the sense of place. And there are also different benefits from the aesthetics to making sure cars and drivers are not speeding through the corridor. The last piece, the fundamentals to achieve the vision. So we heard it's not going to be an easy process. So we'll take a combination of transportation and land use strategies to move the vision forward. So we have to make sure we are getting both of them right. We have to make sure we're partnering not only with the local agencies, but with the developers and the private sector to make sure some of those projects are coming out of the shelves. And we have to make sure we are always working together in partnership when we're making the plans so that we can all align and move things forward this one. So our next steps, so today we're going to get some feedback on what you heard, if it resonates, if you disagree or agree or think maybe it needs to change. And then based on the final version of the vision, we are going to start developing the strategies and the action plan. So right now we just have the guiding principles that are going to help shape the strategies. But once we finalize, that's when we're going to take in detail on what recommendations we have for the report. And on driving text. That's our clear control.
Anyone have any questions? Any thoughts?
When you were talking about, I'm not sick, I was in roller coasters with my kids. And I was yelling at them or at the rides. When you put on the slide like different ways to try to keep traffic flowing, whether that's through the roundabouts or what have you. Are there any places on Cortez where something like that makes sense? Because it's huge. And I'm not sure if, or maybe those are just like suggestions.
Those are just general suggestions. And that's why as we go into the next phase, we're gonna look more deeply into how much space we have, how much traffic at each intersection. I don't think maybe roundabout might be feasible with most places. But those are just kind of general ideas,
Because I know like heading into Sarasota on the 41, they're experimenting with those huge roundabouts over there as you get closer to Fruitville. Going towards the islands, I mean, it does keep traffic flowing, but it takes the one person who doesn't know how to use it and just, it's a ripple effect from there. I guess it kind of also brings, I know, so a few weeks ago, people were arguing about a roundabout somewhere out in Lakewood Ranch, near Gulf Grove or something, I forget where. They were talking about the congestion, like they were complaining, but the science, the study said, this makes sense here, it will help. And people don't, at the end of the day, it becomes a political thing, right? They don't want to upset constituents. But, if it makes sense, go ahead and do it. Like, a few months ago, we were talking about all those crosswalks. But then I think, Renner was explaining how scientifically that has really helped. It's not perfect, it's kind of annoying, but it helps. So, I don't even know if it makes sense as you go further east, because once you get closer to the beach, we all know we're dealing with the tourists, and, the other day someone said, I'm from New York and Florida drivers are worse. It's like, hey, Florida drivers, read the license plates. It's just people that don't, you just happen to be in Florida, right? And I know what they're trying to do, like make even North River a destination, so people don't have to come. I know the ferries are a thing they're trying out now. Try to help get bodies there without having to use the streets. I just don't know how far in the process you guys are. Are there any ideas to help with that congestion outside of just doing the study?
I mean, we do have some ideas, but we wanted to finalize this to see if those ideas are going to be viable and match what we heard. And then through the process of creating the strategy, we're still gonna come back to the community and check every single recommendation that we are gonna approve. And this time around, and this maybe for Dave, when he asked earlier, we're taking a different approach because we want those recommendations to be implemented. So we're gonna double check, triple check to make sure if we propose a roundabout, if it's viable, how much it's gonna cost, what disruption it's gonna make. Make sure we're checking all the stops, to make sure it is something that we can confidently recommend the community behind it.
Like you mentioned like the dedicated transit. Do we have enough transit, like, public funded going out there that would require that? Like, I know they did that in St. Pete downtown, but I mean, they have a bus system that goes everywhere from the beaches all the way to downtown. I know ours do the same, but does it justify a separate system just because I see a bus every now and then? And it's kind of annoying, but do we have that much extra traffic because of the transit?
We're not that far into looking into the transit, but we're just now checking to see if it's gonna be a viable option to even consider having a transit only lane. So then the next step is, if it's a viable option, then we'll look at the different pieces of data to justify having it. So we wanna make sure that if we put a bus lane there, traffic is gonna work, or if it doesn't work, what we have to consider.
People may use it as an express lane.
Yeah, so even before we do get that deep into the details, we want to make sure it's a viable option first.
I would add one thing on the interim scale, right? So that's a long-term deployment, I would consider, right? Repurposing lanes. And then in the near term, we're doing our transit signal priority demonstration.
Which was really cool when we talked about it last time.
Yeah, so, we've gotten consultant quotes back, and depending on how the pilot goes and it works out on 41, Cortez would certainly be a corridor that we look at implementation.
Everybody's upset about the box stuff that Bradenton Police has been doing. It's like, it's the lights, it's like, pay attention.
Stop before you get
Yeah,
into it.
exactly.
And just to kind of complement, it is a long-term vision. A lot of the recommendations will be 20, 30 years. And just think about the 250,000 people that are going to be here by 2050. And if they all travel by car, going to the beach, is a way we're gonna move traffic, you know.
Multimodal makes sense, it's just how.
It's just maybe not now, but we'll have to, see when is the right time? Yes,
No, I down south toward Palm Beach, Miami area, and I'm used to it now because I've been doing it for almost 2 years, but they have bus lanes, and I was just riding out in the bus lane, and the bus was like blowing at me, and I'm like, what you want? And I realized I was in the bus lane. But I noticed that it keeps the traffic moving, and it's just for bus lanes, and they can stop and go, but the other traffic proceeds to go. Now I know the rules, but I mean, I think that would be in certain places in our county, probably not all over, but I think especially like going in certain places where it's really busy, where people can get on the bus and it's consistent with just that particular traffic, I think would be a great idea.
and there's different kind of bus only lanes. There are certain bus lanes on the right side of the road where people use as a turn lane. And there's different ways to implement where people would definitely have a learning curve, but if it's done right, it could get done.
Did you, in your meetings with your stakeholders or in your subsequent study, did you get any insights about the eastern end of Cortez around the mall and what that land might develop into and how the traffic patterns might change with that development? And then I guess a corollary to that would be how you're going to tie that into the whole 44th Avenue East extension.
We did get some insight on what might happen. We don't know actually will be what happened. We heard it might be housing that is coming. I cannot confirm that will be the plan. That's what we heard when we met with stakeholders. And we did consider different traffic patterns, different volumes up to 2050 on what's going to happen in the area, so we can use those numbers to use them out of the contract.
Roundabout be workable there at First and Cortez?
Can you repeat that?
Ryan's already shaking his head, so I got my answer.
They're not supporting it, we're not getting funding, so.
No, any of those recommendations that are supported by a traffic study, right?
Yeah.
It's one of those, I feel like there's lots of questions about that, right? I think, right, it's 100% dependent on the deployment, but politically, I don't see how that's related. So I think it has to make sense, right? Experimenting with, like I said, 41, it all depends on how they play out. Technically, yes, they're safer. The accidents that you have at those intersections tend to be less severe. It's a learning curve, right? You can't expect everyone to figure it out first and it's out there. So, I think it's a good exercise in how we want to plan out. And specifically, like you talked about earlier with Dave, is identifying projects that we can incorporate to our long range plan that may be feasible and global over time. So I think that's the variable focus.
So one thought, we were talking about development. And of course, I know about the one at 75th Street in Cortez. So funding, is funding coming from the developers? I mean, there are some infrastructure fees and things, right, to get paid. Is that relocating the roads? It seems like to me like at 75th Street, they are already cleared the land, and I know there's like going to be a shopping center there and grocery stores and stuff, but it seems like to me that now's the time to be getting with them and planning those turn lanes. There's no turn lane off of Cortez onto 75th if you're heading east. I just sat in it and it's backed up, 10 cars. And then you get it done.
So in that regards, the part of our department that's handling that is our access management and traffic operation. So whenever they build a development of that size adjacent to our roadway, they'll have to figure out how to make traffic work. So
Gotcha.
if a turn lane is warranted, They'll work to get the permit, they'll have to work with our folks to build all the improvements necessary to have access. So there's something that they're coordinating separately in the more immediate term.
So that's the immediate, okay, gotcha.
Piggybacking off of that though, would the funding for such that come from developers? Or they contribute to an impact fund and, I mean, I know it gets mind boggling without the funding, but never mind, yeah, just get mind boggling.
I'd say it's a very complicated question.
It
It really does, and, you know, I think it is, what is the county's or city's stance on collecting those, and at what rate will they be used, and how do they choose to deploy them, and, you know, there's been a huge shift from, you know, impact fees to mobility fees, and those are a lot of internal local county government.
Do they ever involve you guys, because you had this big picture of two counties?
Yes, so we do incorporate, so when we're developing our long-range plan, their CIP is like, you know, the capital improvement program is part of the development of what we do. A lot of our project's minimum requirement is that it is in the county CIP. It cannot be funded using our funds unless it is also simultaneously a priority of the local government. Those are stipulations, same thing, it has to be in our long-range plan in order to fund using our funds. So there is lots of overlap. How they go about collecting and utilizing their own impact fees or mobility fees, fortunately not our places.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Well, thank you for your presentation. Move on, I guess. Yeah. Next one, next presentation, I guess this is the. Sure.
I have two bridges to talk about today. These bridges are, both of them are in 789. The first one to talk about is the Longboat Fast Drawbridge. We have a PD study looking at replacing this bridge. And so I'm here today because we have our alternatives workshop tomorrow and Thursday. So tomorrow's our virtual meeting, Thursdays are in-person meeting. To go over the project, this is our overall transportation project development process. PD study is phase 2, that's project development and environment. This is where we look at the purpose and need for the project. We develop engineering solutions, we engage with the public, and we document environmental impacts of our alternatives. After PD is complete, the project moves into design. This particular bridge, it was built at the same time as Cortez and Anna Maria, and it is past its original service life. So it is having to go through increasingly expensive and disruptive repair projects to keep it open. And it has substandard elements, so you don't have a bike lane on it, you have the sidewalk with the little curb on one side. So we're looking at replacing the bridge and putting multimodal accommodations on it. So workshop tomorrow online, Thursday in person, and I'll show more details on that. 2021, we had our kickoff meeting for this project where we got surveys sent out. We collected a lot of information on boat traffic. We also did surveys of all the marinas on Sarasota Bay, and through Coast Guard coordination determined that we will need a 78-foot bridge if we go with a fixed bridge at this location. So going the alternatives, we do have two movable bridge alternatives. The first one is the lowest possible that we can do through Coast Guard's requirements, so 23-foot clearance. This is a little bit higher than the existing bridge. Second one is 36 feet. This one reduces the number of openings by about 35%. And then the final one is 78-foot fixed bridge. Now the movable bridges, the mechanical components add a lot to the project cost, over 30 million to the project cost. So the fixed bridge is coming in around 80 million, while the movable bridges are over 110 million. So one thing is correction is the virtual meeting is 6 to 7 p.m. tomorrow. It is a go-to meeting where we will go over the project video and answer questions. In person is 5 to 7 at Christ Church on the north end of Longboat. We'll be there with our boards, project video there, and the project team will be there. I have Daphne Spanos from Scalar, our project team, with me here today. Have any detailed questions that I can answer. She'll be there, and whole project team will be there Thursday. After we have our workshop, we will coordinate with department leadership, with local government leadership, NPO, on our recommendation. And then we'll go through our detailed environmental documents and work towards going to a hearing next year at the end of next season. And then we will do our federal project submittals and hopefully get the project approved in fiscal year 26, which coincides with our design. We do have design funds in 26, but right now construction is not funded in the 5-year work program. And our construction target is currently in the early 2030s, so that the construction of this bridge is not going on at the same time as Anna Maria or Cortez. So, open up for questions for this project.
I have a question, because I'll live right there at that. So between now and 2030, the bridge has got, there's a lot of repairs that need to be made, right? It's concrete wall, all of it. And if, can you address that? I guess, is that an ongoing thing?
And so our bridges are maintained by our District 7, District 1 Shared Structures Maintenance Office. They handle all the repair and rehab projects. So they did the one a couple of years ago.
Right, they did a big repair a few years ago.
A lot of times they have to put the jackets on the piles because the corrosion is happening to them. And other surface patches on deck. Sometimes we have to start replacing deck, and that becomes a major issue because the road's going to close.
For sure.
So it is up to that office. They haven't given me a rehab schedule. But I imagine that leadership at our districts will look at these 3 bridges to Anna Maria Island and see which one makes most sense to do first. Anna Maria and Cortez have the advantage that they're already in design. This one is going to be a couple years before we can get to that point. But this Longboat one, we do have an advantage of, we do not need right away on this project. We do not need a right away phase. We do need a little bit in Manatee County. Where bridge ties down is impacting Coconut Park. So we do need a little bit of property transfer for that, but it's not our normal 2-year phase.
You plan to do, especially with a high bridge, so free parking going to be the bridge that you extend it over.
The
Got a boat ramp there.
yeah, so we are right now, it's the very southern end of the park. There is a connection between the Bayside Park and Gulfside Park. So that would remain in place, and we would plan to put in another cross-access connection between the boat ramp and the Bayside, the Gulfside Park. What goes on in between, to be determined. That PD&E is looking at footprints for environmental impacts, so going between which section or an MSC wall, what we put underneath, won't make much difference to our environmental documentation. So that's something we'll probably let the design side figure out through further coordination. But if you have ideas for something you would like to see there, you can submit that to us for consideration.
They need parking. You need some of the right. You don't think you need right away? You have couch that with, except we're going to get some from Manatee County. So you do need right away.
Exactly, I agree. Yes.
What kind of shape is the current bridge in?
It's without getting into details, it's on the lower, it's one of the worst in our district.
If you get it fast enough, no.
You touched on the just the channel, the current that, and then kind of the issue that we're dealing with on the sediment.
So this is one of the two access points to the Sarasota Bay. The other one is the UPass. The Coast Guard has given up on maintaining UPass, so they don't consider that channel navigable anymore. Longboat Pass, there is a lot of current going through there with the tides because of all the bay being forced through there. So there's a lot of sand being pushed in and out, which has caused your island to form over time. That wasn't there 20 years ago, and that's formed now under the bridge. And the bridge, when it was originally constructed, they just stripped the piles until it hit limestone, which was much shallower than what we normally do, which causes the bridge to kind of shift a little bit, which became a problem when the utility line being put in a few years ago caused the limestone layer to shift a little bit, and the bridge stopped locking. So that's the big enough concern that our maintenance office won't allow the town of Longboat Key to dredge that down from underneath it because they're concerned about triggering another shift of the structure.
And there are piles underneath. There's at least one pile that has a good section of rebar exposed. No concrete at all, probably for this amount.
Is the condition of the bridge adding any urgency to the project?
All three of those bridges need to be replaced as soon as possible. But I can't tell our office to speed it up.
Any other questions?
Well, I guess, my general thought was that probably the Manatee Bridge was gonna be done first, just because as I followed it, I've lived out there. Probably been the last, but what I'm hearing today is that no, it might get flipped around simply because the right of way acquisition, especially the Longboat one, it's the worst shape and the easiest one to build. Hey, does this make sense? From what I'm just hearing in the last 5 minutes.
That's up to the department. I know, we don't own or operate the bridges.
Yeah,
I-
and
that's-
we are not using any code funds
Yeah.
on it.
So
We are doing federal ACBR funds for these, both of the projects I have today. There's also, you live out, they're all towards the island.
They're all intellectually not. And they all need to be replaced as bad.
They're all built safe in the business.
Correct.
Yeah.
Any safety rush
Well, tell you the building, if it collapses, it's gotta be,
or hurricane?
Yeah,
maybe run a boat into it.
good plan not to have them all done at the same time.
That's better. That's a better plan.
Yes.
The next one, is this, oh, you have a question?
I was just gonna say, but you said earlier that both Cortez and Manatee are much further in the process.
Yeah, those are both.
Yes.
Under design,
That's what led me to think that they were gonna be happening first, but they
Yeah,
are.
they still.
they should.
And this one's not even, construction's not funded.
It's, right, because that right now is outside the work program. So moving on to the next location, so going down to Sarasota. So you have the Ringling Causeway Bridge, big one, then you have the twin bridges going to St. Armand's, so I'm also managing the study for replacing the twin bridges. Those bridges were also built in the 50s at the same time. So they also have a lot of same problems, but they aren't movable bridges. For the little Ringling bridges in Sarasota, in addition to having the PDD study ongoing, we did go ahead and start design, so we are at our 15% submittal. That project also does not have a right-of-way phase, and that one has construction funds in 28. Location is just east of St. Armand's Circle. We are going to a public hearing next week. So for this one, we had our workshop already. We showed the single and the twin bridge alternatives, and we and support for the single bridge alternative, so this is what's going forward. So we're making our official announcement of this decision, the hearing next week on Thursday. This bridge includes, 4 travel lanes that are out there now, but we're adding transit-only lanes and bike lanes and shooting paths, to both sides. Bike lanes and transit lanes will be added to the approach roadways as well. There's another project east of Bird Key that is a resurfacing project that is also adding transit lanes. So that should be continuous from roundabout to the end of my project, and some future project will carry that to St. Armas. My project, PNE's ongoing, design's ongoing, construction is funded, and the 54 million on here is our latest construction estimate. If you look at work program, you'll see something like 61 million, because we got, this number is new, and the work program cycle hasn't synced yet, but our cost estimate did go down from last time. Schedule is going to the hearing next week, and we will wrap up our documentation and then submit to for federal approval this summer, and hopefully get our approval by the fall. Overall schedule, design still has plenty of work to do. Into utilities, because there's utilities to relocate. And then construction is scheduled to start in 28, fiscal year 28. The hearing, we have our open house starting at 5 o'clock and formal presentation at 6. The virtual meeting starts at 6, so that is simulcast of the formal portion of the hearing. But if you are online, still speak to the whole group as if you were at the meeting. And so that's it for that project. So question?
Thank you. Okay, 6B. Yep, 6B. Draft Transportation Regional Incentive Program, TRIC.
Yeah, so this is a program type that's within, see, looked inside of our project priorities. So a little bit about TRIP, it's the Transportation Regional Incentive Program. It's a state-funded program that requires projects to support the regional transportation system, typically in our area, that's I-75, 275. Anything that's in support of that, it creates, more of a regional impact. Our transportation system is eligible for this program. It has to be identified in the LRTP as well. These funds do require up to a 50% match in order to be utilized. So there has to be significant skin in the game by the local government to draw down on these funds. We also work with our 2 neighbors to the north and one to the south in Polk County and Charlotte County to develop joint trip lists in order to kind of consolidate our requests within the district. There's only, for example, about $7 or $8 million a year dedicated to this fund. As you can see, the numbers on that list are a lot higher than 7 or 8 million. So there has been an exercise in kind of consolidating some of these. We're going to continue to work with the counties to kind of draw down some of these requests from their large stature currently in this list to more reasonable chunks. In most recent terms, Moccasin Wallow and Manatee County last year received about $6.5 million. So they've slid down the list into the 3rd slot on both of those lists as per the agreement with the other 2 counties. There were 2 minor changes to the list from the TAC this morning. On the first list, number 5 and number 3 did flip. Lorraine Road from Palmer to Fruitville is now 3, and Lorraine from State Road 72 to Nice Trail is now 5. That was at the request of Sarasota County. And the same thing, since on the other list is just 3 and 4. So, and there was one other minor addition that is not currently eligible on the TRIP list, but Manatee County wanted to provide it for future purposes. It is Fort Hamer Road from River Isle Run to US 301. That project will be added tentatively as we continue to prepare our updated LRTP. And as that project, Manatee County is not currently in first slot, so they likely won't see funding for the next few years anyways. So they want to make sure they have a project on the list. We said we would accommodate that on this list. So those are the two changes to the draft that you see here that we added this morning. And with that, I'll happily take any questions from you at this point. Great, thank you. Great, and I will do a brief introduction here. As mentioned in our January meeting, we're working on the update of our congestion management process. It's a mandated process by MPOs that are required by federal highway. This looks at how we deal with mitigating our congestion in our region. An 8-step process that we do follow. However, we've taken our own little spin on it and taken a look at some other components, including ITS, the impacts of transit and bike ped on this. And with that, I will turn it over to our consultant, Lee Hong Soo, who's with Kittleson Associates, who's helping us on this update. And we'll have to take any questions at the end when she finishes her presentation.
Thank you, Ryan. Hello, everyone. This is Lee Hong with Kittleson Associates. Today, I will give an update on the congestion management process. Since our last CAC meeting, we shared the progress of the CMP process, but this time I will share further analysis that we have been able to achieve. Next slide, please. First, I want to recap what is the congestion management process. It was a requirement from FHWA and also include a couple of different steps here. And one of some main steps is to define the goal and objectives, and also to recommend performance measures, review of available data source, evaluation of the performance measures, and also identification of strategies and monitoring system. Next slide, please. From the previous CMP, we have, from the previous CAC meeting, we have shared the goals and objectives. We have 8 goals in total. Here, list out goal 1, 2, and number 3 with the measures on the right side. The performance measures we identified have different focusing time period. Some of the measures will analyze annual result, and some of the performance measures we will analyze in daily or peak hour level. Next slide, please. Next slide lists out goal number 4 to number 6 and goal number 7 to number 8, all the performance measures. Those were talked in detail in the previous CAC meeting, so I list out here for everyone as a recap of the goals and objectives that we talked about last time. Next slide, please. So part of the CMP task 2 is to assess the strategies, implementation, and evaluation. Here we are going to share 6 different goals and those performance measures under each goal and the actual analysis result for each of the goal and objectives. Next slide, please. I want to recap everyone about the data collection and the study network that we are analyzing for the MPO. We're focusing on the state highway system and some other recommended roadways that have data coverage, but also have relatively high traffic and potentially could have some congestion issues. So we further expand from the state highway system and include some other corridors for the CMP. Some data we collected, including the crash data from Signal 4, the AADT data, here travel speed, NPMRDS, truck travel speed, American Commuter Survey 2018 to 2022 5-year estimate, and also we collect the data from the Active Transportation Plan, ATP, for the multimodal component of the CMP. And also the FDOT sourcebook was used for the data analysis and collection. Next slide, please. So here on the right side shows the map of the MPO with the goal number 2, which shows the vehicle hours of delay during peak hour. We also have a vehicle hours of delay at daily level, but here I demonstrate the peak hour for your reference. The goal number 2 is aimed at providing high quality mobility to people and freight. So one of the thing we want to focus on for the CMP is to solve the congestion issue, which the hours of vehicle hours of delay could tell us more background about the actual existing condition. So I-75, not too shocked that the corridor have a very high hours of delay, and also University Parkway and State Road 70, some sections that are showing as relatively higher or medium level of delay from the legend showing on the left side. Next slide, please. Next slide, we're focusing on goal number 4 to afford efficient transportation operations. And the measures we are focusing on is the planning time index, which is a reliability performance measures to show how reliable your trip is. And here we're using a grading color to show the different level of planning time index at daily time period. So I-75 is showing as very unreliable, having a lot of non-recurring congestions. In some of the areas along the Longboat Key and with the connections between the beaches, you can see some of the very orange color and red color there showing as non-recurring congestions and very unreliable in the MPO area. Next slide, please. From here, we are calculating the level of travel time reliability, which different colors shows. The green color shows it's reliable, and the red color shows the segment is unreliable. And this segment highlighting as unreliable, most of them are along I-75. You can see some red color north of the US 301, and also some areas along I-75 was also highlighted as unreliable segment. Next slide, please. Goal number 3, calculating and aiming at increasing reliability of travel within the CMP network. So one of the measures we calculating is the percent of CMP network miles operating reliably. From the map and the segment level result, we get 94% of the CMP network miles operating reliably. This is based on the level of travel time reliability and based on the federal threshold that people, that everyone is using for the MPO level. Next slide, please. Next slide shows goal number 5, which is providing affording efficient transportation operations. And we are showing the truck travel time reliability index here as a gradient color. And the truck data was coming from the Regional Integrated Transportation Information System, which only focusing on the National Highway System, but it will still be able to tell us the main freight corridors, truck operation, and which segments are very unreliable. And I-75, we saw some interchanges and some sections were highlighted in very unreliable segment. Next slide, please. Goal number 7 was aiming at multimodal side of the congestion management. The goal is to promote accessible use of the transportation system for all users, which including bicyclists, pedestrian, and people who use the transit, like transit commuter. So 2 performance measures that we are going to show is the percent of CMP network with bike pad or trail facilities. And the next one is showing percent of population within half mile of transit bike pad or trail facilities. Next slide, please. So with the percent of CMP network coverage with bike path or trail facilities, we can see 46.3% of the CMP network has sidewalk facility. The 41% of the CMP network has bike lane, but only 1.6% of the CMP network has trail facilities nearby. So which means we have a relatively okay coverage for sidewalk and bike lane, but the trail system is definitely not covered enough of the CMP network. Next slide, please. The second measure is showing the percent of population, and from here we have split the transit stops, pedestrian facility, bicycle facility, and trails. For the percent of population within half mile, we know 52.1% of the population live within half mile of transit stops. However, it doesn't mean people have accessibility, doesn't mean people are really using the transit system. It also has something to do with transportation system highway and how long the connectivity of the overall transit system. For the pedestrian and bicycle facility, over 60% of the population are living within half mile of those bicycle and pedestrian facilities. 11% of the population live within half mile of the trail facilities. Next slide, please. This page shows the number of EV chargers, which is focusing on the goal number 8 to encourage preservation of the natural environment while maintaining economic development and livability. We want to focusing on the EV chargers, which is also level 2 and above, which means first charger. So the map on the right side shows the different breakdown by private or public. For the private EV chargers, which means it's either used for and owned by the company, and they are using it on site for their employee, or it means it sometimes it's a government facility that it only will be used upon further request. And then most of the locations showing in MPO are public facility that the public could be able to access to. And along I-75, it has some relatively okay coverage, and for most of the interchange, you will find a public facility at exit location along I-75. Next slide shows the next steps of the CMP Task 3, which is the final CMP document. We're going to working on the CMP document and executive summary under the Task 3. So from all the analysis we do, some next steps that we're going to work on is to summarize analysis for the remaining performance measures. We only present 6 goals in total, but there are other performance measures that we are going to further analysis and showcase in the final report. And another next steps is to identify the project locations. From all the maps and analysis we do, we're going to overlay those maps all together to find the focus area for us, which is the corridors and intersections that we see a lot of congestion issue, safety issue, and other type of CMP related issues that we are going to work on solving. And also from those project locations, we're going to identify strategies that to help us to solve the congestion or safety issue. And also the CMP document that we're going to provide, which has the full report and summary, a short summary report. So that's all the current status and the analysis that we have been able to accomplish. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, this is Eddie Abrams from Longbow Key. How do you identify where the charging stations are? Is there some document? For example, I know that there's one near my house that's not on that. There's no dot there, so.
Yes, the data source we're using is called Alternative Fuels Data Center. That was developed by US Department of Energy. Those maps is showing a level 2 and above. So I know most of the in-house is probably considered as level 1. So that's why I think it's not showing up. And this provides a very accurate, and they update the data very frequently. We have the locations for each of the few stations. And it is public accessible, and you can be able to access that directly online. But thank you for the comments. I think it's good for us to know if you know any locations that are not really mapped there. It will be good for us to map it even further and be able to point it out on the map, so it will reflect like the locations more accurately.
Yeah, okay, because I know that there's one at Whitney's Restaurant, which is on the corner of Broadway and Gulf of Mexico Drive. And it's a public one, and I see Teslas and other cars plugged in there all the time, so.
Yeah, we're gonna work with the counties to make sure that they're reporting those things as well.
Yeah.
As they become available, it's
Exactly.
it's a moving target.
Exactly.
So, as they become available, when they're publicly available, don't make it wear on their list, just not as, these are not, the data is like everything, there's a lag and easier to deploy charging station than it is to get it.
Exactly.
Set. So, yeah, we'll continue to update it as available.
There's it's a map-based app, PlugShare.
Yeah.
The one I use has a lot more than what she showed on there.
Yeah.
Okay. So they'll be updating this as they go.
Yes.
I have some other questions.
Sure, go ahead.
Tom Bransky from Sarasota County. On goal number 2, it was a map of vehicle hour delay. I assume that was current vehicle hour delay. Do you have any projections of what future delays might be, again, based on the population information you first? But I know it's work. How many of those turn red versus just I-75?
Yeah.
It's a moving target, similarly, right? I think it's an ongoing projecting is difficult, right? But if you look, we have to look typically projections based on a historical basis, right? So if you look at our historical basis from 2015 on, it's been progressively, as VMT grows, we continue to have to deal with that. So I think setting targets, right? A lot of this is used to set targets and understanding our mobility data, right? I think if we can deal with it at a decreasing rate as VMT increases, right? If we can improve congestion relative to how fast we're growing, that's a success, right? It's unrealistic to say our congestion is going to go just theoretically down, right?
I guess my thinking would be, it would be a good tool to use to decide when to add lanes I-75.
Oh, that is model. Yes, there is a traffic demand model, right? So what was discussed in the report, I'll provide with you all right today, where I got the statistics on population growth and parcel data and traffic analysis zones. District 1 does a regional planning model, and that models all of that down to the parcel.
Okay.
So that is heavily used. This is reporting on what's currently happening. There's a traffic demand model that does build out for the next 25 years through the lifespan of our LRTPs. That models exactly that. So as we build that out and as we see, 3,500 homes on a parcel, we add 500 homes between now and 2030, and another 1,000 between now and 35. It'll show the impact of that as LOS falls, level of service falls on those roadways. We'll know the approximate time span in which those kinds of things will be.
So how does this complement that
Yes.
model, or how does this model work?
Yes. So this uses INREX and NEAR data, both nationally accepted data sources that looks at for us. This is I would say near term to midterm deployment, right? So this identifies like you mentioned, we'll overlay delay, we'll overlay reliability, and it'll help us define certain segments and intersections. Approximately 25 to 30 that we can focus our efforts on in the near term to deploy certain implementation strategies. So
I think I don't want to sound facetious or anything, but it essentially is telling the politicians what we already know.
Correct. I mean,
Where the traffic jams
I
are.
mean, no one's here trying to fool anybody. There's congestion everywhere,
Okay.
right?
It's just documenting what we currently.
Absolutely, you know, focusing where we want to invest our limited amount of funding to do that, right? It's no secret, right? Florida as a state is dealing with excessive growth. This isn't West Virginia. Well, we're not seeing declining population growth. It's much more difficult to take, you know, $1 billion worth of necessary improvements and $50 million, right? We have to be very strategic in how we want to deploy those things. The intent of this is to focus in on those really, really bad areas and say, yeah, supplementally, anecdotally, we know crossing the DeSoto River, very challenging. Getting up and down I-75 during peak hour, very challenging. It's noting those things and then deploying the ideas that the strategies that are out there and didn't do it.
I got one other techie question. Planning time index, are there units to that? What does that mean? What is it?
Yeah, if you want to explain, I can also add on at the end.
Yeah, so planning time index is so it's a ratio. What it does is it is basically based on your time. Make sure like it's a how you should budget for a trip to ensure you arrive at your destination at least 95% of the time. So which means that if you're saying I want to get to a dentist appointment, you know, and normally like it only takes you like 20 minutes, but you know sometimes it's congested and you want to like reserve like 30 minutes to get there. So it's basically like translate to that. So mathematical wise, the calculation is 95th percentile versus 50th percentile. So which means still means like you get there like 95% of time. Yeah.
Yeah, so when you see like 1.5 on the map, right, the ratio is that a trip that takes you 10 minutes, 95% of the time you'll get there in 15. It's a ratio of your travel time.
Okay.
Other questions? Yes, thank you, Arthur. Thank you very much. Right, next, is it still you, Ryan?
Yeah, last one, we got another, Harrison's with us here from Kinley Horn. As you know, same thing, we're working through a lot of our studies. These are all to supplement our 2050 update. But as you know, resiliency has become a huge topic of discussion here in the last several years and has continued to be so. We came out with our phase 1 study that evaluated our transportation network and assigned a level of criticality and vulnerability to that network. We're now in the second phase of this process. We're really starting to narrow down our focus on specific roadways and kind of created a matrix for you today of some of the top priority projects that we want to address similarly to the CMP, but through this process, looking at recommendations from our resiliency advisory group, recommendations coming out of the state's resiliency action plan, and some kind of overlapping correspondences with those things. So created a hypothetical project list. We presented this morning to the TAC. They're going to be reviewing, but no real major comments out of this. There shouldn't be tons of surprises. These are similar areas where we know we have substantial resiliency issues that we need to address, but similarly, we want to make sure we have them focused so that our funding can be dedicated to some of these projects, but also, you know, we can go out there and get discretionary grants, protect grants, federal and state resiliency-based grants to kind of address those things. So with that, I will hand it over to Harrison to kind of discuss what we're doing so far with resiliency stuff.
Hey, everybody, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
See if I get my camera going here. I don't know if it'll cooperate. Okay, so thanks for the introduction, Ryan. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So yeah, we'll talk about the goal of this resilience study. We will recap some engagement we did, and then we'll move into discussing the project matrix, which is kind of the final list of projects that Ryan mentioned, and then we'll talk about some next steps. So on the next slide, we will introduce or talk about the study goal. First of all, we want to identify, as was mentioned previously, we are about to, or the NPO did just kick off the new 2050 LRTP. So we're wanting to be able to identify projects that could potentially be incorporated into the LRTP. And as Ryan just talked about, funding is limited. And doing a study like this can open up opportunities for additional funding sources. We want to be able to leverage that. And a lot of times with these grant opportunities, the people giving out the grants want to see a level of commitment already done to show that these projects are ready to go, that a lot of the homework's already been done, and that can increase the likelihood of being awarded those extra funds. We go to the next slide. So as some of you might remember, we've done some stakeholder engagement already. We talked to different municipalities in the MPO region, talked to staff from these municipalities, from county governments, from emergency management, and talked to them about what kind of issues they were seeing, where they were seeing them. And we also did sort of the same thing with the TRAG, the Resilience Advisory Group. And we also had a virtual survey that we did, and we combined all of that input with our technical analysis that we did in phase 1. And the result of that, if we go to the next slide, the results we organized into 4 tiers, as you'll see here. So tier A are projects that were mentioned by both the TRAG and the stakeholder engagement that we did with the local staff and municipalities. And
I can always pick up.
Might need to.
I know.
Well, Mike can keep going.
Okay.
So I did kind of mention that earlier, that the DOT RAP is the Regional Resiliency Action Plan. There's also a RIC, which is the Resiliency Improvement Plan. Those are, one's the study and one's an implementation guide. Like you mentioned, A, B, C, D in here, they're a combination. It's a matrix creating, the highest priority being A, obviously on the sliding scale that is mentioned by the resiliency group, by the local involvement and stakeholder engagement, and is mentioned in the RAP. So the highest level priority all the way down to a local level road that, is not included in our LRTP, but was identified as a very critical and vulnerable location that we should consider in our update here in 2050. You can go to the next slide. So here is a not so complex but complex graphic here of the matrix that was created based on a sliding scale of LRTP versus non-LRTP at this time. So the ones on the right, we're really going to have to focus on incorporating. They were identified by our groups of people, DOT professional staff, our resiliency public works folks across the region. So those ones on the right are not on LRTP currently and couldn't be funded existing today. So those things we need to focus on. The ones on the left, those high A, B, C priorities are in the LRTP on state facilities. There really isn't a ton of shocking, roadways on here, but they are priorities that were identified by multiple entities across the highest in these fields, right? We really tried to focus on bringing on people that were not just in public works, but had backgrounds in environmental studies and understanding resiliency and the impacts of our storm events, sea level rise, et cetera. So this will be sent out. I'll provide it only to take a deeper look at this list. We kind of just got it together here in the last couple of weeks. So this will be sent out to you all to kind of take a look at and review. But really want to make sure, like I said, we have a very limited in our current format. We've got about $3 million a year that our board has dictated us to be able to use. It's not all the funding out there, right? There's state funds, state resiliency funds, there's federal protect grants. The thought of this is that we can tag on additional funds onto these projects that are improving resiliency in these areas. Not to say that we're going to be the sole funding source for some of these large scale projects, but additional funds can be added in these areas that are of the highest importance. So really, like I said, we'll send this out. Don't feel the need to provide comment back on this. Feel free to provide comment to us at any time. I said this is a work in progress. We're still developing this list. So we'll be sure to send this out to you all, and you can get comment back to us on that. With that, we're currently, like I said, here in March, we're bringing it through to the board as well here in March. We're working on the project list, like I just said, of identifying the priorities. In May, we'll be bringing it back to this group, the TAC and the board, and talking about how we want to integrate it, like I just mentioned, to the LRTP. There'll be a funding strategy devised to deal with how we want to incorporate resiliency projects right now. As you brought up earlier, it's a box fund. Maybe this strategy as we go and actually assign specific revenue to these 22 projects. And then finally in June, wrapping up with the final report and the executive summary, similar to the CMP, kind of finalizing all of our work and consolidating it. So next slide. The next steps are really, we said, identifying specific mitigation strategies. So now that we've narrowed down our list from 150 segments down to, less than 25 projects, we can really focus on what's causing issues. Is it inland flooding? Is it surface level flooding? Is it king tides? All these different effects that are happening, we can come up with some mitigation strategies to deal with these based on the project location. So assessing, specific hazards, and then determining where they stand, right? Are they gonna need to be is there gonna need full environmental work done? Do we need to do design? Do we need to buy a right of way? Obviously, there's gonna be some form of construction involved. So determining the phase, and the time band in which those projects need to be placed into the LRTP, developing our more specific cost feasible plan with the major outcome of our long range plan. So, I think that's it for these slides, but yeah, so there's my information. I can happily talk about any other projects or issues you think you've got with the resiliency plan. But really, same thing. We're trying to focus our efforts with the funding that we do have available. Not just, it looks great on paper. We've identified all these locations, but really focusing our efforts on things that we could feasibly do in the next 20 to 25 years is the goal of this update.
Anybody have any questions?
I do have one.
Go ahead, Steve.
Sir.
The matrix of projects.
Sure.
You have a link to what the issue was and
It's
that's
going to be. That's what we're working on now.
next.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the mitigation strategy based on the location. So we're gonna bring up specific hazards, what's causing that, and what do we think you can do about it, right?
Okay.
That's kind of
And
the,
we'll see that in May?
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I'm most interested in.
yeah.
To follow up with that, the mitigation strategies, would they focus mainly on or solely on physical roads being changed somehow?
Not
Or
entirely.
the reason that the flooding would happen?
Could be lots of things, right? It could be moving the building. There's lots of things that you can do to mitigate the impacts of, of events, right? So some of them could be engineering, some of them could be dealing with, floodplain issues. Like, so on our end, technically, right, you would be focused on, are you gonna elevate a roadway? Are you gonna improve stormwater? How do we want to address that? So typically, yes, it's gonna be a more specific engineering probably based solution rather than, there's more philosophical ones that you can get into about where do we place some of these most important and critical things, right? There's a reason why EFCs are not on barrier islands, things like that. My assumption at this point, it's not filled out or completed yet, but it is going to be a list of probably engineering level improvements that can be done to kind of address the issues in some of these areas.
Okay.
So Ryan, I know, like Longboat Key is putting all the power, all the utilities. It's mostly done, that goal. 75%. Is there funding attached to this? Are you identifying funding sources to make these changes? And to that point, there's the roundabout at Broadway and on Gulf of Mexico, 789, I guess, whatever it is. And that's only partially funded. So is that a partial, could that be a resource to get funds to?
Great question. So yeah, so there's a great argument out there that resiliency is improved by any roundabout, right? Requires very little maintenance, doesn't require power to operate. All those things go into being resilient. So certainly, we have, like I said, we have a very small pot dedicated to addressing resiliency issues right now. That's a great example of a project that we could help supplement, right? If they're $3 million short, that's something where the MPO could help step in on a state roadway. It's a viable project, it's on our list. Certainly an application that we would take a look at as funding becomes available that we get help supplement. Said the cost of resiliency improvements is well beyond what we have dedicated to do that. This is an attempt to kind of really focus on specific areas where we can help supplement things.
Okay. Any other questions for this presentation, Ryan? Okay.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Give you some more information.
All right. Good deal. All right. We're at the end. Customary, once around the table, we start over here.
I'm good, thanks.
I'm looking forward to getting that list of what the impacts are, what the mitigations are for the resiliency projects.
Anybody down there?
I just wanted to extend my compliments to Nina and Ryan and the team that showed up at Motorworks on Saturday to have a community input session for the 9th Street and 14th Street projects, traffic studies in Bradenton. I asked a lot of dumb questions and they were very polite.
I'm good.
Okay, with that, we are adjourned.
Class.
Yeah.